You want to increase testosterone, exercise can impact testosterone levels. Endurance activity, if performed first, leads to decreases in testosterone during the weight training session. Endurance exercise that extends beyond 75 minutes is going to start to lead to reductions in testosterone. And it's very clear that high intensity interval training, sprinting, etc., is going to increase testosterone. If you want to optimize testosterone level, the best supported, at least scientifically supported solution is exercise in its various forms. Weight training, endurance work, weight training to failure, or less intense weight training can impact testosterone levels. But I want to remind you that we're talking about testosterone both in males and females. And based on what you know from earlier in the episode, testosterone can have numerous positive effects in both males and females, provided they're in optimal range. People say, testosterone is increased by weight training. You want to do big, heavy compound movements, squats and deadlifts and chins and things of that sort. But what about the scientific studies? Like, what's the actual basis for this? Because if you just take a step back and look at this from the perspective of a scientist, you'd say, okay, what is a squat? A squat is loading up a bunch of weights on a bar and then, sitting down essentially and standing up over and over again. What's a deadlift? It's lifting heavy weights from the ground. Why would that increase testosterone, right? This is what's often not discussed in the weight training or even the exercise science community. What would actually stimulate the release of testosterone from the adrenals and or testes? And which one is it? Adrenals or testes or both? And that's often not discussed. But as a neuroscientist, this is the kinds of things we think about because we think always that genes don't create behavior. Immune systems don't know when to be activated. Lungs don't know when to inhale or exhale. Hearts don't know when to beat, except for the information that it gets from neurons. The nervous system controls all of that. And so really the answer has to be in the neural system that's related to these particular types of weight-bearing exercises. And you'll find some examples that, for instance, they do muscle biopsies, they can actually see receptor increases and find a lot of that, but not a lot of mechanism about how the nervous system would do this. And the reason you'd want to know how it can do it is that you could potentially build better protocols or figure out exactly what about these movements is triggering increases in androgen receptors and testosterone. Heavy weight training. So this is weight training where the sets are done with anywhere from, kind of 1 to 8 rep range. So this translates differently depending on ratio of muscle fiber type and so forth. But where basically people are working at anywhere from like 70% to 95% of their maximum, or sometimes even going right down to their 1 repetition maximum, really kind of, max effort. What you find is that using the nervous system in a way in which they're moving heavy loads. So that I would translate to recruitment of high threshold motor units for you muscle physiologists, heavy weight training, but not weight training to failure, where completion of a repetition is impossible, leads to the greatest increases in testosterone. Now, I'm sure there are a bunch of exercise jockeys out there that are going to, come at me with a bunch of things where, but high volume and this and training to failure and that. Sure. If you're willing to kind of put things side by side, adjust for exogenous testosterone treatment and all the rest, which was done in these studies, what you find in general is that weight training with heavy loads, so anywhere from 1 rep maximum to somewhere in the 6 to 8 repetition range, in males or females, increases testosterone significantly, and it does it for about a day, sometimes up to 48 hours. There's something about the engagement of the neurons that recruit high threshold motor units in muscle when moving heavy loads, but not to failure, that has to provide some sort of feedback signal either to the gonad to produce more testosterone or is increasing the activity of receptors in the body. Now, why do I say that? Well, this is the puzzle, right? How is it that a particular movement, just like how is it that interacting with your child is increasing or decreasing testosterone? This is the kind of fundamental question at the mechanistic level. There's clearly a influence of hard work at the neural level and then at the muscular level for increasing testosterone.
Units in muscle. And when
there's also clearly an effect of working too hard.
Has to provide some sort of
increasing cortisol too much, although I'm speculating there, in terms of reducing testosterone. And so the reason we're getting
Now,
nitty gritty about this is because ultimately we'd really like to understand what are the optimal protocols. You know, out there in the literature you hear move heavy objects to increase testosterone. Some of that will be converted to the more powerful androgen DHT by 5-alpha reductase, etc. But we really don't understand yet how these particular behaviors increase testosterone and whether or not it's doing that by modulating the receptors or it's modulating testosterone release directly, presumably testosterone release directly and sensitivity of the receptors. That's what most of the muscle physiology studies that I was able to find point to. But this basically boils down to a particular set of protocols where if you want to increase testosterone for whatever reason, that weight training with heavy loads but not to failure seems to be the best supported, at least scientifically supported, solution to that. Now, it may not raise your testosterone levels as high as you want, but it's definitely taking things in the correct direction. Now, many of you might be endurance athletes or also enjoy exercise besides heavy weight-bearing exercise. And there are several studies exploring whether or not endurance activity can increase or decrease androgen levels, and whether or not you combine endurance activity and weight training, whether or not that has any effect if you do the endurance activity first or second. And the takeaway from all of this was that endurance activity, if performed first, leads to decreases in testosterone during the weight training session, as compared to the same weight training session done first, followed by endurance activity. In other words, if you want to optimize testosterone levels, it seems to be the case that weight training first and doing cardio type endurance activity afterward is the right order of business. Now, when these are done on separate days, it doesn't seem to have an effect. They showed no statistical interaction, but it seems that if you're going to do these in the same workout episode, that it's move heavy loads first, then do cardiovascular exercise. So there's a little bit of data looking specifically at how endurance exercise impacts testosterone and its derivatives. And it's very clear that high intensity interval training, sprinting, etc., which somewhat mimics the neural activity that occurs while moving heavy weight loads, is going to increase testosterone. There's ample evidence for that in the literature. And that endurance exercise that extends beyond 75 minutes is going to start to lead to reductions in testosterone, presumably by increases in cortisol. But of course, the intensity of the exercise is going to be important too. You know, I don't think anyone really believes that hiking for the 3 hours is going to reduce your testosterone. Whereas I think if one were to go out and run hard for 3 hours, that you can imagine there'd be reductions in testosterone by way of increases in cortisol. And so while this area certainly needs more research, it's pretty clear that limiting the endurance exercise to 75 minutes or less, not making it too intense, is one way to keep cortisol from going through the roof. But I've talked on previous episodes, and there are a lot of others who have talked out there about how to clamp cortisol, how to keep cortisol more reduced.